What's going on, everybody? So if this looks like a Subaru Crosstrek wheel, you would be correct. This is my 2013 Crosstrek. This is the rear wheel. It needs new brakes, so that's going to be my project today. So let's get into it. Tools and supplies that you'll need. I have a 1/2-inch torque wrench. I have a 3/4-inch socket. I have a 1/2-inch extension, which I'm going to use with the torque wrench. A pair of rubber gloves. A DeWalt impact driver, which also is used with that 3/4-inch socket to remove the wheels, and a 3/8 ratchet with a 14mm socket, and then also a can of brake cleaner. You might also need a 17mm wrench or an adjustable wrench if your bolts that the caliper bolts to, the slider bolts, those might tend to try to spin when you tighten the caliper bolts. So either an adjustable wrench or a 17mm wrench should work to hold those in place. For brakes and rotors, I bought a kit from Amazon. I'll have a link in the description below where you can buy those. It's an Amazon affiliate link, so it doesn't cost you anything extra. I just earn a little bit of a sales commission. I ended up spending a little bit more to get the rotors that are coated. That's some sort of an anti-corrosion coating. I live in an area where salt and de-icer gets used on the roads during the winter time, so that's why I wanted to get these better rotors. And in this box we have all the little clips and brake pads. First thing we're going to want to do is chalk both front wheels. I've got some little rubber wheel chocks. I've got one on the other side as well. I have a small floor jack, and I put a little piece of 2x4 lumber on the lifting pad, and we're going to roll that under and lift it by the rear differential, which is actually an approved lifting point. We'll just center the lifting foot right on the differential. And there we go. 3/4-inch socket and my DeWalt impact driver. I am pretty sure that the brakes on this side are worn down enough where they need replaced. I've been hearing some screeching sounds, which is indicative of the wear indicator rubbing on the inside of the rotor. The wear indicator only exists on the inside brake pad. Another thing we can look at is rust and weird discoloration on the rotor. The first thing we want to do is remove these two caliper brackets. I've already pulled those out, and then we can slide the caliper off, but we do also need to take a screwdriver, poke it in through this hole right here, and pry a little bit to compress the piston back into the caliper. If you don't do that step, it's pretty much impossible to remove the caliper. Then it will slide off. One of these bolts here, the slide bolts, is actually pretty stiff, so we're going to have to take a look at that. You can see this top one moves pretty freely. The fact that this bottom one is bound up means that probably there's more wear on the bottom portion of this pad. And these two bolts that hold the bracket in place were pretty much seized in place. It took a lot more effort to remove, so I definitely want to install some anti-seize on these when I reinstall them. Next thing we'll do is pull out this little rubber plug. This allows us to get to the adjuster star wheel for the parking brake assembly. What we're going to need to do is loosen that parking brake just a little bit to retract the shoes so that the rotor will slide off. And just like I suspected, the rotor is slightly rusted in place, so we're going to need to take a hammer and tap on this a little bit. An easier way to get the rotor to release from the hub if it's kind of rusted in place is to use 2 bolts in these 2 holes. I think they are 8mm by 1.0 thread pitch. I'll find out for sure what they are and add some little text down below. But you twist those bolts a little bit at each time, and the bolt threads through the rotor and then applies a little bit of pressure here, and it basically pushes the rotor off of the hub assembly. Let's take a closer look at everything now that I've got it all apart. So this was the top bolt. That one was pretty much frozen in place. The bottom one wasn't quite as bad, but I'll clean these up with a wire brush. And now let's take a look at my pads. They are definitely not sliding very freely in these little metal brackets. So this pad is definitely worn more down here towards the wear indicator, but that wear indicator looks like it's partially broken. Probably broke because it's been riding on the inside surface of the rotor. Let's take a look at all the other parts. So I have taken the slide bolts out of the caliper bracket. I've cleaned those up. What I need to do is put some grease on the caliper slide bolts and reinstall those. This one goes in the top, and the one with the little rubber sleeve goes in the bottom. So how this is going to be oriented is like that. So this one goes here, the one with the rubber sleeve goes over here. And look at this. Here is the broken piece of the wear indicator from that inside pad on this side. So we'll install some anti-seize, do some grease on the slide bolts, and then reinstall the caliper bracket and the new brake pads. The top bolt slides in real easy, and we want to push that little rubber seal up over the top. The bottom one, because it's got that little rubber sleeve on it, that takes a little bit more effort to get it to seat. There we go. And that slides nice and freely now. Spray my new brake pads with a little bit of brake cleaner. My brake shoes came with new metal clips that hold the brake shoes. I keep calling them brake shoes. They're brake pads. Brake shoes are on drum brakes. And then we'll flip it over and do the other one. They are a little bit stubborn to get fully seated in place, as you can see here. I'm kind of messing with them a little bit. Then I'll spray some brake cleaner on my parking brake assemblies. Just get some of that brake dust out, and it makes a mess on my driveway. Installing the pads is going to be a lot easier doing that before you install that to the brake assembly on the rotor and everything. So what we're going to do here is pick up our pads, take just a little bit of grease. That's actually way more than I need. Kind of smear it around on this area. So this is the area of the pad that rides in that little stainless steel clip. And that is one thing that caused my brakes to bind up. That was sort of rusted in place a little bit. So this is the inside pad. So let's flip this around. I don't want to touch that with my greasy glove. But what I do want to accomplish here is to get this pad slid back out. You can see how it's inserted at a nasty angle. And with it being at that angle, it's going to make it difficult to slide it down over the rotor. Okay, that looks better. Do the same with this one. Install our new rotor. Spray that down with a little bit of brake cleaner. compress the piston back into the caliper. So I don't have a C-clamp. A C-clamp works a whole lot easier because it takes a lot less effort. But what we'll do here, take one of these old nasty pads, and I'm using a woodworker's clamp. Then we'll go ahead and install our caliper bracket back onto the rotor. And I did already put some anti-seize on these two bolts that hold this bracket in place. And then we'll tighten those up fairly snug. And then we'll go ahead and reinstall the caliper. I may not have compressed that piston enough. No, I didn't. I would definitely recommend a C-clamp, or I just spent about 5 minutes getting that piston compressed back into the caliper. I don't have a C-clamp. My woodworker clamp wasn't working very well. Okay, if you notice, this is spinning. We don't want that to spin, because when it spins, we'll never get this bolt tight. So I need to get a crescent wrench and hold that. 17mm wrench fits that. And then we'll go ahead and tighten the bottom. Hopefully you didn't lose this little rubber plug. We'll go ahead and reinstall that into the access hole for the star wheel adjuster. And then we'll go ahead and reinstall the wheel. After you've got the tire and wheel installed, then go ahead and torque the lug nuts to 89 foot-pounds. There is no need to do any adjustment on the parking brake when you put everything back together because they are self-adjusting. So just come into the car and then pull firmly up on the handle, release it, and do that about probably 6 to 12 times. And you want to pull up on it pretty firmly, probably a little bit more firm than what you would normally apply the parking brake. So do that a number of times and you'll feel the tension start to increase, and then you won't have to pull the handle up as far.